Hello, Peaceful Valley Church. It's Tuesday, another beautiful day. I love the springtime. Across the road from our place, a freshly planted barley field is coming up, and I love seeing the green all across the field. I love seeing everything, really. The geese have come in, and the deer and the elk are out in the fields, and it's so cool to see God's creation. And so today, in light of that, I want to continue on in Psalm 104. We started that yesterday, and seeing God's creation, the psalmist said, it's almost like when we see how beautiful the creation is, we realize that God does majestic work. He makes things beautiful. And so the reason we're going to Psalm 104 is on Sunday, I had suggested that we can learn about God by going through the Psalms and asking some good questions, looking for some helpful hints about what's true about God. And the first hint I gave is look for the "you are" statements. And of course, yesterday we saw in Psalm 104 verse 1 that the psalmist said, he just said it out loud, God, you are very great. And that sounds, I know, to some people like it's cheesy. It reminds me of my little kids, 5, 6 years old. They'll make a comment that sounds kind of cheesy. Dad, you're big. Well, yeah. That's their way of communicating that they think that there's something special about Dad. He's big. And in their eyes, that is a huge deal. In our mind, we quite often think that we have to be more profound than that when we talk to God, as though our relationship with God is something different than my 5-year-old's relationship with me. You know, my 5-year-old's going to grow up and eventually be kind of like me. I'm never going to grow up and be anything like God. He will always be infinitely bigger than me. I'm not going to grow up to be just like him. So for the rest of my life, into my 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and if I make it into my hundreds, I have no choice but to look at God and say, man, you're big. He's just big. And to try to make it sound more profound and beautiful than that, we honestly can't do much better than that. God, you are very great. But the psalmist does take a little shot at being a little more descriptive than that. And so we're going to read Psalm 104, verses 1 through 4. Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty, covering yourself with light as with a garment, stretching out the heavens like a tent. He lays the beams of his chambers on the waters. He makes the clouds his chariot. He rides on the wings of the wind, and he makes his messengers winds, his ministers a flaming fire. All of these descriptions that the psalmist uses of God, he's saying the greatness that you have is like the biggest and best and greatest king there's ever been. He dresses a certain way. He transports himself a certain way. His home is a certain way. His ministers or ambassadors or servants, they are a certain way. There's something about God that's like the biggest and best king I can ever imagine. And even if we just look at this first little statement, it's the end of verse 1. You are clothed with splendor and majesty. The word splendor means it kind of sparkly. And majesty has this idea of high and lofty and valuable. And when these words work together, you realize that that's a glorious thing that you're looking at. It's beautiful, it's radiant, it's spectacular. In our world, we don't really get to see the king in his chariot coming through the city. But imagine back in the day, everybody else is dressed in brown sackcloth, and here comes the king, and he's wearing purple robes, and he has gold in his crown and his necklaces, and it's embroidered with gold thread, and even the servants who are around him, they're even dressed in majestic clothing. Imagine that for a second. The psalmist is saying God is majestic like that. infinitely more majestic than you and I. You know, we start thinking we're pretty special, and what's super helpful for us to get a little bit of humility is to realize that we're not really all that amazing. We're made out of dirt. We're made out of the dust of the ground. And so, on the one hand, we're not really that amazing. And yet, God treats us as though we are his children. He loves us and he cares for us. And so on the one hand, we're no more valuable than a couple of shovelfuls of dirt. And on the other hand, he treats us with majesty. His work over us is full of splendor and majesty. And so it puts us in a place that we quite often don't realize. Again, in the picture of the king on his chariot coming through the town, all the peasants are looking and saying, wow, he's marvelous. But what's the perspective of his servants? Don't his servants get the chance to see him in his splendor and in his majesty? Aren't they amazed by how beautiful he is? Today, my prayer for us is that we would recognize how beautiful and majestic God is. You know, we start kind of treating him like a genie, like he's there to answer our prayers and our desires and our wishes. But sometimes we just need to stop and we need to recognize that he is beautiful. So beautiful. And it makes the issues that we're going through that are kind of dingy and dirty seem, they just pale in comparison to how amazingly beautiful God is. I pray that we would all be encouraged by this and it would lift our hearts today. Because even when we see the creation and how beautiful it is, the way God has dressed himself is vastly more beautiful than the creation displays. Vastly more beautiful than we could ever conjure up. Vastly more beautiful than we can ever imagine. That's the beauty of our God. May God be with us today. Have a good day, Peaceful Valley Church. Goodbye.